Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give it a minute or so as attendees come online. Thanks for joining us for our last session of our series, which is really, it's a bit sad, but all good things must come to an end. So as you might know, we were doing a 6-part series with Pounce Marketing on all things marketing to help MSPs, because we all know it's not necessarily our strong point. So today's session is top tips to optimize your website. If you do have questions during the session, please put them in the Q&A and Sim and I will come back to them at the end of the session. During this session as well, I do encourage you guys to remain engaged. The most engaged attendee will also receive a free SEO audit from Pounce Marketing. So with that, I'll hand that over to Sim to kick off the session today.
No worries. Thanks, Meryl. Like, I have to say, like, when I was putting this deck together, I was like, it was really bittersweet because I'm like, how is this already the last one? We've obviously been taking you guys on a journey, starting off with, you know, your buyer personas, how to develop content. So I'm really hoping that you found these little short series very valuable. So the session today is really focused on how can we optimize your website, and just not optimizing it for the sake of optimizing it, but how can we optimize your site for conversions? So for those of you that have been joining me on this journey, you'll know who I am, but I see a couple of new faces in the room as well. So my name is Sim. I'm the CEO and founder of Pounce Marketing. My background has been in cybersecurity for over 15 years, which is now really just showing my age. Pounce has been an evolution and a journey, and we are now 5 years in. We've got a team of 16 all sitting behind me, and we're a mix of creatives, developers, a little bit of everyone really to help any organization either build, scale, or grow their marketing function. So in this entire session, it's all about your website, right? I'm sure everyone here has a website, but you can also see when you think about a website, there's so many different things that we consider, you know, and different people within the organization have different requirements, whether it's like, oh yeah, has my content been clicked on? Do we have a privacy policy? Have we captured their email address? Do we need to have pop-ups? So there's lots of different considerations, and anyone you speak to in your business will have a different ask or a different requirement that the website needs to serve. But why is it really important, and why should we care about a website? I know working in the MSP space, a lot of business gets generated through word of mouth and referrals, but it's really important to have your website because it really is your digital business card. It forms as that even like a check and balance in place that, yep, you've got a website, it's credible. It also helps you identify like the customers that are engaging with your site. You know, if people don't really know who you are and they really want more information, your site needs to be able to give them the right experience where they can learn, where they can find out more about you. And depending on how your site is structured, your website can actually be a lead generating tool. And I'll show you how that kind of works a little bit throughout the presentation. And more importantly, I think the biggest thing with any website is don't just have a website because you're like, oh, yep, I need to have a website, but your website really needs to serve the purpose and objective of what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to educate your audience? Are you trying to get them to book a free cybersecurity audit from you? Are you trying to get them to contact you? Are you trying to get them to engage with content? So once you start mapping all these different things out, you can start really harnessing what the website really needs to do and how you can optimize it for the purposes that you set. So the first thing with any website is that it has to be responsive and it has to be mobile friendly. More and more people are now looking at or just searching for organizations on their phone, whether they're traveling into work or traveling into the office. And when you're looking at something on a small device, you really want to make sure that the content is all catered, it's easily legible, and there's a flow in terms of how the content is digested from the front or from the top of the page all the way to the bottom. Obviously, on a mobile device, you can't have as much content, but it's really important to think about how your website is catered for either mobile devices, tablets, and then doing desktop later. A lot of the times when we are thinking about websites, people will be like, yeah, is it responsive? And what that generally means is most designers will build your website on a desktop first and then scale it down to fit your smaller devices, whether that's a tablet or whether that's a mobile phone. What we do at Pounce is when we talk about mobile responsive, we actually design the entire site first on mobile to make sure that that entire experience is catered for. Once we're happy with the mobile rollout, then we look at how that kind of scales up to desktop. The other thing is when it comes to responsive design, obviously when you look at a website either in your conference room or whether you look at that from your home, your screen size is going to be different as well. So you need to make sure that the content is easily is built in a manner that is responsive for it to scale up and scale down. Google also actually pays quite a lot of attention in terms of your ranking of how your site's responsiveness is on mobile. Google tends to rank sites at a much, or give a bit more leeway to sites that are mobile responsive versus sites that aren't. So that also kind of ties into your overarching SEO that you have for your site. Some examples here are like some of the references that I like. And, you know, for example, when you look at Atlassian, the content, everything is stacked. So your logos are kind of stacked from a product perspective. The information is nicely, easily legible. There's a good, clear CTA. So this is something that you want to think of as well. When it comes to mobile devices, it's important to understand how you take that user on that journey, because the more they scroll down, the higher the drop-off rate. So from a messaging perspective, you want to make sure you're capturing your main chunks at the top of the page rather than all the way down the page. Same can be said for the iPhone. When you log on, it's nice, easily scrollable. It's got options for you to either learn more or buy. So again, here they're talking to two different demographics from a user perspective, right? They're talking to people straight away that want to learn about the product that haven't used it versus people that already know the product and they just want to quickly enable them to buy it and make it simple to complete that process. The next thing is looking at your global navigation. This is probably one of the most challenging things when it comes to a website because everyone kind of gets inundated that I have all this content that I want to put on my website. I'm just going to put everything in there, and as my business scales and grows, I'll just keep putting content. It doesn't really matter what the flow is. But it actually is really, really important for you to guide your user across your entire website. Most people, or I'd say probably 80% of people would land on your homepage and probably not go through all the other pages, right? So you really want to make sure that when you look at your homepage, you've got that linking to all your other pages. The next thing is looking at how your global navigation. So the very top bar of your website has to have a very simple navigation system. A good rule of thumb is to have 5 to 7 tabs. It normally is in odd numbers rather than even numbers. And you really want to also establish groups of content. What I mean by that, so you can have like your home, then from there you might want to have the about page. In your about page, you, depending on the size and scale of your organization, you might want to have a team page or you want to have a careers page. So all of that can sit as separate pages within the about us page, but thinking about how you group all of that is equally as important. Then from there, you might want to move on to your products and services. From there, you might want to have some resources or some blog content. From there, you might want to have a contact us page or you might want to have some references. So thinking about your content first in terms of what is the core pieces of information that I need to convey to my audience through my website, and then making sure your global navigation on the top has those clear delineations so someone who's accessing your site can easily find the information is really going to help you with conversions. The next thing to note is that when it comes to your global nav, you do not need to have every single thing listed in your global nav. Sometimes you can just have some of the core pillars that you're looking for, and then at the bottom in your footer or your global footer, you can then list out all the sub pages and stuff so people can easily find what they're looking for. When it comes to determining what your global navigation is and how people flow through your entire site, it's very, very important to look at it from the user perspective and not all the key stakeholders in the business. Because I can tell you this is where it kind of gets challenging because, you know, everyone has an opinion, but like the good old saying goes, opinions are all like, I'm just going to put a beep in there, but you know what I'm trying to say. So really, when you're thinking about your global navigation, think about your users and how they're using your site and how they start traveling through all the other pages as well. In terms of global nav, there is your traditional options where you can have your global nav, oops, I've just scrolled too far, on the top bar. Sometimes you've got options here where you can click and open, and then it's a menu that's listed this way. I always get confused if that's vertical, horizontal, one of them. But there's different options, and how you capture that information really determines on the audience and how you want them to engage with your site. The most important thing, and this is particularly because I am a marketer and this is one of the main things that I look at, is the messaging and the content. When someone comes to your site and they're looking for a product or a service, it really needs to resonate with them. Otherwise, the bounce rate or the drop-off rate is going to be really, really high. For example, if I'm searching for an online solution for storage of my data and I jumped onto Box, and imagine if it said something completely different and it didn't resonate with me, I'd probably look at another option for my storage needs. So when the user comes and lands on your site, you have a few seconds really to draw them in, and your homepage is probably the most important, and that header banner in the first section on your site, that is your few seconds that you have to capture your audience. So it's really important for you to communicate what your brand does. It's also important to articulate what your value proposition is. Why should someone care, right? And I think when people come and look at messaging, it is a bit hard to articulate what that is, but sometimes I'd say you can also do a little bit of A/B testing as well on your website and test how some of that messaging resonates with different audiences. So you can have, say, messaging A and then see how that resonates with the audience or the traffic that's coming to your site. And then you can have messaging B and then see if that resonates better, and then look at how that, and let the data guide you in terms of how you can change your messaging. The next most important thing as well is that the website needs to have clear call to actions, or CTAs as I like to call it, because if you don't have a CTA, it's almost like people are just consuming content with no purpose or no objective as well. So clearly here you can see in both examples that I've put on the right-hand side, we've got Evernote, which is all about making sure you organize your work, your life. You've got notes, and it straight away when you land on their homepage, they've got to sign up for a free account, or they've also got an option where they've catered for two different audiences again, one that has no idea who they are, and one that literally already has an account and they're a customer of the site. Again, with Box, you can clearly see that they've got two options, whether you can contact them for more information or get started. So with anything with your website, your CTA buttons are also a tool that you can use to help navigate people through the different pages. So what do I mean by that? Clearly, you can see here where you've got Get Started. This might take you to either a product or a solutions page on your site. The Contact Us will take you straight to the Contact Us page. As you scroll down in all the different sections of your website, you need to make sure that you're guiding the user on a journey to reach an outcome, right? So if we're saying in the home page, we're telling, learn more, then that can go into an about page, or that can go to like a portfolio page, or like customer testimonials or case studies. But you want to build out what that narrative is and use the messaging and the CTAs as that tool to help you get there. Next most important thing is also looking at the images and how your images tie back to what your brand is trying to convey. One of the most challenging things is, I've seen time and time again, there's like great websites which have both amazing messaging that ties into amazing imagery at the same time. One of the things that I like to say, and what I've noticed particularly in our space, is that everyone tends to use a lot of stock imagery without actually treating it. And what impact does that have, or why should I care? I'll tell you why. It's because a lot of websites then end up looking the same, right? Like you'll get the normal traditional guy who's sitting there in a server room looking at something as data points. I can tell you, any site you go to, everyone tends to generally use the same consistent images over and over again. And is that detrimental to your brand? I would say it is, because as a user, I'll be like, oh, haven't I seen that from somewhere before? So it's really important to make sure that you're using your images to bring the message to life. You know, if you're talking about being the best and, you know, that's part of your brand values, then rather than just using traditional images of cybersecurity, it might be a change to maybe use an image of someone being the best. Like, you know, you can use an image of an athlete or a runner who is the best at what they do. You know, there's different ways to showcase and articulate your messaging, but those images are key. The next thing is also to look at using different image formats. And this includes WebP, SVG, AVIF, because it also allows you to compress your file, so it reduces the weight of your overall website, and it doesn't impact the speed of your website without compromising on the quality of the images as well. So something to consider. The next one looks at optimizing your website for speed. There's a lot of different factors that come into this, whether that's images, whether that's the amount of HTML code that you have, but an average website should load between 0.8 seconds to 2 seconds. Anything longer than that, people just get annoyed and frustrated and they just drop off. Every time you delay or a user has to sit there and wait for your page to load, the higher the bounce rate is. So sometimes it's important to look at your hosting. It's important to look at the CMS that you're using. It's important to look at the plugins that you're using. And one of the free tools that I highly recommend to everyone is Google PageSpeed Insights. It's a completely free tool. Once you jump on, all you need to do is put your URL in there. It then tells you it scores your website. So Google does do a scoring on your website for both desktop as well as mobile. So you can then use that as a tool to then see areas that you can optimize further, or things that are actually causing your site to have a lower score according to the page insights. With a lot of clients that we work with, we understand that everyone uses WordPress, and that is a very common thing because WordPress is one of the most popular CMS tools. It's also a really quick, cost-effective way to build a website. And one of the easiest ways to do it is using a theme. So there's a lot of themes that are out there. You can buy a theme, get someone to install it, and then all you need to do is replace images and assets. But one of the things that you need to make sure is when you are selecting a theme-based website, don't just select a theme because you're like, oh, that theme looks nice, I'm happy. Like, you know, it's easy for us to be able to modify it. But make sure that it has the right functionality that you're looking for as a user. There is over 1 million different themes out there, but choose the one that has the functionality that meets your requirements. The other thing is, with a lot of themes that you do buy, there's a lot of unnecessary code that sits in on the back end, or there's a lot of different like layout options that you may or may not need. So make sure that if you are using a theme-based website, that you are making sure you remove all of that, because otherwise it becomes really clunky, and this again can impact your page speed. The next thing to consider is that there's lots of different plugins you can use for your website, whether that's a plugin for SEO, such as a Yoast plugin. But anything when you consider plugins is make sure that it's used by a verified publisher. These tend to be a little bit more expensive, but in the long run, the quality of this plugin is much better. And it does help the overall site speed that you have, something to consider. I'm just mindful for time here. The next one, I promise I'm coming to the tail end, is forms on your website. Every time we've got a call to action or someone wants to go onto your website, there needs to be some form of ability for us to capture their data, whether that's on the contact us page, whether it's your email subscribe. We want to make sure that all those forms are connected somewhere. Because if they're not, then I can tell you what generally tends to happen. If your form is not connected to a CRM and someone fills it up for an inquiry, then you guys aren't getting the actual leads that are coming through. So the benefit of having people come to your site is for them to fill up a form and contact you. And if that's not integrated into your CRM, you're never going to be able to know or follow up on those people. And again, it's going to leave a negative user experience. So make sure your forms are all sitting into or connected into a CRM. If they're not, if you are using WordPress, it's probably caught in the back end of WordPress. So that might be something that you want to check as well. The next thing is there's so many people that do fill up contact forms and it's all spams and bots because they're just trying to feed you with like information and messaging that you really don't care about. So one of my recommendations is to make sure you add captures, which is the little questions at the end of the form that you need to fill up to make sure you're not a bot. And that's a good way to kind of reduce spam as well. One of the biggest things that we are all guilty of is when it comes to any type of form, we want to capture like everyone's life history, right? We want to capture first name, last name, email, phone number, company, state, job title. Oh my God, the list goes on. But I can tell you right now, the rule of thumb is you need about 3 to 5. Any more than 5, and I can tell you people are going to be like, I don't really want to, like, why do I have to do it? You know, like, it's just too hard. It fits in the too hard basket, or I don't even want to give up my information. This is not so important when it comes to your contact form, but it's really important if you are using assets for lead generation. And it comes back to the big old thing when it comes to resources. Should I add a form to it? Should I not add a form to it? My recommendation to everyone would be is if you do have brand new assets that are valuable, yes, add a form fill where people actually have to fill in their details to then be able to receive that asset. But then over time, if it's a very aged piece of content, if that content is like 2-3 years down the track, then you don't necessarily need to gate it because there is some benefit of just offering thought leadership content that people can digest. With any of the forms that you have, I cannot stress how important it is to have an opt-in, like an opt-in or a check-in box as well. So when people are submitting their data, you're not just going to continuously spam them. But if they are submitting their data, you need to make sure that if they do not tick that box and they do not agree to subscribing to your marketing data, that you don't email them, because I can tell you those fines for spam are very, very high and you do not want to get caught in that bucket. The next thing as well is when it comes to forms, I know we're all guilty of it, but most websites will always have like, hey, let's subscribe, like let's add a form to the footer of your website to subscribe for a newsletter. Great, I'm a user, I'm super excited, I love this company, I'm putting in my details, but half the time I guarantee you, I never receive a newsletter. And then I just get disappointed. I'm like, but I just filled in all my details for this amazing newsletter, but I didn't get anything. Again, user experience, it's not the best, right? And I hate to say this, but like how your forms look and how they're structured on a page can also make the difference whether people want to fill it up versus if they don't want to fill it up. So make sure your forms are all visually appealing so that it kind of encourages people to want to actually submit their details. So my key takeaways. I'm not going to give you a lot of different things, but the 3 core things, if you walk away with anything from today's session, is make sure your website is responsive. Make sure that you can read it on mobile. Number 2, make sure your website is completely aligned to your brand. As your business scales, as your business grows, your messaging, your products, your services, they need to change and they need to evolve, and this needs to be reflected on your website. And finally, as you keep adding content to your website, as you keep adding images to your website, it's really important to make sure that we're optimizing the site for your page speed. Because again, if someone comes on your site, the page takes too long to load, they're gone and we've completely lost them, right? So there's different ways of looking at that. And with that, I am just on time, which I love. And I know, Meryl, we kind of said that we're happy to give away an SEO audit, but if anyone really wants one and they can't get one, we can have a conversation separately, and we'll probably throw that in there because I'm feeling really generous today. But Meryl, I might throw it back to you to see if we've got any questions.
Yeah, so while we wait for some questions, or even I was thinking we've got a few minutes if there's a brave soul out there who is willing to share their website that might want to have some tips while we're online. That might also help everyone who's online as to some tips there. While we're waiting for some questions, if there is any today, I did have some that you had mentioned around the copy. So you mentioned try split testing with A/B testing, different copies to see which gains traction. How long would you leave a version A and a version B for to determine or gather the data that you would need?
It really just depends, Meryl, because, for example, the last time we launched our site, we also had heat mapping in place. So we wanted to capture how people, where they were going, what content they were engaging with. So we did that as a program of work for over a year to really then help us modify our site map, our site structure, see how people are engaging, what's not. Anytime we have a new campaign, and it's a landing page as an example, oh my God, I can't talk properly today. We'd normally say if the campaign is running, we'd do that testing for 3 months, get the learnings, and then the next time we run another campaign, utilize those key learnings for the next one as well.
Awesome. I've just got a question from Drew. He is asking, what is the optimum speed for a website for both desktop and mobile?
So your website load time should be around 0.8 seconds to 2 seconds. So it has to be quick. And that's, I think if you are a user and you're on mobile, you probably expect it to load quicker than on the desktop, because I think on the desktop you have a little bit more patience, but definitely on mobile you want it to be quick.
And I've just got Chanel as well asking about her website. I don't know whether you have access to the Q&A. Can you see the Q&A to have a look and jump on the website?
Oh. Very quickly. Hang on, I'm just trying to move all my screens. So looking at it, it is looking like a great site. There's lots of good content in here. There's some really nice, clear, like messaging resonates. There's good CTA buttons. I think the only thing that I'd probably say is for this one, Chanel, is just to make sure that obviously because on your main homepage you've got a video. I'm not sure how we've kind of reduced that on the back end, but sometimes that can impact site speed as well. So that's probably the only thing that I would say. I think your news and insights, this is really nicely laid out. Sometimes what might be useful is to have like some search functionality. So if people want to search, they can search. Apologies if there is one in here and there isn't. Yeah, if you want to add some search functionality, or if any of your articles, you want to make sure that you've got share functionality in there, that would be another good thing so people can easily share the content. So for example, on a page like this, I think this is more a press release. So yeah, even for press releases, I'd say normally you can either share it on your social channels. So that might be something that you might want to consider. Contact. Yeah, like here at the moment, you've got your contact at the bottom. That's completely fine. So yeah, I think overall, this is a really nice, clean site. But more than happy to kind of just do a little bit of a deep dive at the end of the session as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Sim, and thanks, Chanel, for the question. Now it's 1:31, so we are at time. Now, if anyone does have any further questions, we will be sending out a follow-up email, as we always do with the webinar recording. We might also send through some of those free tools that Sim was talking about. In terms of the engagement for today, thanks guys for adding some questions in the Q&A. We're going to be looking at the back end for the stats in terms of engagement for the live session. So we will be in touch if you are the winner of the free SEO audit. We also will be in touch for the overall winner for the strategy session that was up for grabs. The most engaged attendee for all of the sessions across the board will win an hour session with Pounce Marketing. So we will be in touch if you are the winner. But with that, thank you so much, Sim, for joining us for this series. I know from speaking with partners, it has been very valuable in stepping up their game in their marketing. And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Hope you found it valuable.
Thanks, guys, and I'll see you guys very soon, hopefully on another 6 series session.